Hello, I'm Indra Bartona and welcome to the Positivity Vibe Tribe podcast. Today, hosting, of course, with Success Minded, and we are interviewing Bret Magpiong, featuring the topic of how to come alive with purpose. Now, he is launching his book officially on Amazon, The Delta Theorem. So there will be a link below this interview, below this video, that you can catch a copy of the book. So enjoy the interview, and I am sending you love, light, and blessings. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Positivity Vibe Tribe show. I'm Indra Bartona, a producer in the film and television industry, TV host, and the founder of the Positivity Vibe Tribe. Originally, I'm from the Gold Coast, Australia, lived in London for several years, and now based in Los Angeles. A little bit of background on the Positivity Vibe Tribe. It all started with a YouTube channel based on a positive vibe lifestyle theme, and Positivity Vibe Tribe quickly became my personal brand. Positivity Vibe Tribe Twitter Spaces is a natural evolution to bridge the gap between all social media platforms and bring them to life with conversations about living a positive life, with the bonus of full engagement from all of you. Positivity Vibe Tribe Twitter Spaces is based on the main topics, although we love to be adventurous, of abundance mindset, self-care, gratitude, mindfulness, law of attraction, meditation, affirmations, and so much more. You can track down on the YouTube channel, and there's a link in my bio. So today we're joined by co-host Stephen Caggiano, our NFT designer, behind the scenes extraordinaire team member, and also anything that is techo or AI orientated. Reach out to Stephen because he's an expert in all of those areas. Thank you so much for your support in the team. And of course, today we are hosting this space with Success Minded, where the Positivity Vibe Tribe joins forces with Success Minded's community. Our mission of supporting and growing community is perfectly aligned, plus the essence of our content works beautifully in harmony. He's grown his community to over 600,000 members by writing unique content and motivating people. He's a lifelong learner, always looking to grow himself mentally, physically, and intellectually. And while he grows, he makes sure to take his community on path of growth as well. So, warm welcome to our other host, Success Minded, of course. Yay, in the house. All right, let's get on to what today is all about. Today's guest is a certified coach who has served as an advisor to entrepreneurs, executives, professional athletes, entertainers, and their respective companies, many of whom have been recognized on the Forbes 400 and Fortune 500 listings, and as a C-level executive for various advisory firms. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the RIA Channel, the Family Wealth Alliance, and Schwab Impact. Other achievements include having completed a SEAL Fit 20X, a New York Marathon, Go Ruck Tough, and Hermosa Beach Triathlon. He and his wife, Layla, have been married for over 30 years, have successfully launched a 20-something daughter, and live in California. Today is the official launch of his book on Amazon, The Delta Theorem, an innovative framework for being fully alive and truly wealthy. Warm welcome to our guest, author Bret Magpiong.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's absolute thrill to be here on a very special day for me. So thank you for having me on today.
We are truly excited to have you in the tribe and to choose the Positivity Vibe Tribe to launch your book today. So thank you so much, Bret. So much gratitude for today. Okay, we are going to jump into the first question. And of course, feel free, everybody, to jump into the chat at any opportunity you have to say hi, to ask a question. And of course, we will be taking questions from speakers later on in the space. Okay. Bret, you're the founder of the Rudius Strategies Group. The name Rudius originates from the ancient practice of Roman emperors granting freedom to warriors who fought fearlessly and daringly for life to the fullest. And again, even though I read that, I always think, wow, that's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about this name and the choice? And this is just, I get this vision of Roman emperors. Love to hear that first, and then share with us what you do.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So thank you for that. So, I saw the movie Gladiator. Many of you probably have seen that movie, and many years ago. And there's a scene in that movie where the character that's played by Russell Crowe is told that in order to win his freedom as a gladiator, he needed to basically have the Roman emperor recognize him. And the way that Roman emperors granted freedom to basically people that were condemned to death, such as a gladiator, was that they presented them with this wooden sword. It was called a rudius. And so this notion of granting of freedom, or really coming fully alive, just think about it. A gladiator was condemned to death. And yet they won their freedom and fought for their freedom. And this Rudius is representative of that coming fully alive. I named my firm the Rudius Strategies Group on this concept that, in order for us to, as people, really make a difference, that we need to come fully alive. And if we can come up with strategies to come fully alive, that's what the Rudius Strategies Group is all about.
That's awesome. And so share with us a little bit about what you do at Rudius, because you have many facets going on over there, which are really interesting.
So there's a number of things that I do. One is I do exclusive coaching with people. I walk them through a framework, the framework that I wrote about in the book, The Delta Theorem, which we'll talk about in more detail on this space. But I walk them through this framework, which works on things like purpose and performance so that they can make a difference, whether it's in their workplace, in their homes, in their lives. That's one, exclusive coaching. I also do inspirational speaking inside of the Rudius Strategies Group, and we'll go and talk with companies to talk about how to have their people come fully alive in what they're doing. This great resignation that we all went through is a great example of where people were looking for purpose. And the pandemic created this situation where people were feeling like, wow, there's got to be more. Well, when I do some inspirational speaking inside the Rudius Strategies Group, it talks on and touches on those particular issues. And then finally, I do provide some content in terms of whether it's the book that I wrote or other modules that I have that help people almost do a do-it-yourselfer, a way of going about coming fully alive. So those are all the things that the Rudius Strategies Group is all about.
Thanks so much. Another question I have for you is, were the areas of experimental learning, coaching, and inspirational speaking, were they always an interest? And when did you start on this path?
They have been throughout my lifetime. I mean, I found myself as a kid, frankly, gravitating towards these places where, let's say, be the captain of a team or some form of leadership and really inspiring people inside of this. Now, as my life went forward and I found myself in my career, I was a wealth manager, as you indicated in the intro, to some very, very successful people. And what I found was that I didn't set out to be a wealth manager. That wasn't my passion, to be a wealth manager. But what happened inside of that space that I was in is I found what I did love to do, what I was passionate about, and that was inspiring people. And it could be a client, it could be somebody who worked for me, it could be a colleague, So, I always found myself gravitating towards this position of wanting to inspire people to come alive is what I ultimately came to, but I didn't call it that, as I was growing up and growing into this.
Wow. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. Okay, Success Minded, jump in with your burning questions.
Yeah. Brett, I just had a little question there, because today, of course, is the book launch for your new book on Amazon, The Delta Theorem. I would just like to ask, what was your motivation to create this book, and who do you think would be the ideal audience for your book?
Yeah, thank you for that. So let me tell you a couple kind of paths that came together around this. So, I worked with people that were the less than 1%ers. And I say that with all humility. I found myself in a situation where I was working with folks that had tremendous amounts of wealth. And what I found is that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, I was getting asked questions that had less to do with investment management and more to do with other forms of wealth. Things like, what is my business or my wealth going to do to my kids? Or how come I don't feel like I have that much time on my hands? Or, why is my health not that great? All these things which are truly forms of wealth. I mean, there's certainly financial wealth, but there's also relational wealth. There's the wealth of time. There's physical wealth. There's all these various things. So I found myself, answering or thinking about these questions with my clients in my occupation. And then I looked at my own life. And listen, my life, like all of the folks on this call, lives feel very large. I've been married for 30 years. I've got a 20-something-year-old daughter. I've got a home. I've got a car. I've got a dog. All these things are what feel like very large stories in my story. But then what happens to me, and Indra, maybe this happens to you because you live in Los Angeles, is, I would find myself on the 405 freeway, which in Los Angeles is the main artery, but it's an artery that often seems clogged with traffic. What I found myself is sitting there in that traffic and feeling this sense of, really, this is it? There's got to be more. And while my story feels and is very large, I felt like there was a much larger story that all of us know that we're caught up in. And yet we don't necessarily know how to fully tap into that. And so when those two kind of paths converged, whether it be my clients that had all kinds of wealth and were asking questions, or myself who didn't have that level of wealth and was asking similar questions, I found myself gravitating towards trying to explore what it meant to be fully alive and truly wealthy. I mean, one of the things that I write about in the book is this, that when you come alive, you then make a difference. And when you make a difference, you create value. And when you create value, that's when true wealth starts to kind of come about. And so, this path that I found myself on, and a lot of reading and a lot of exploration and listening to podcasts, I mean, just all the information that was out there basically came together in this idea of, I want to write about this and lay out what this Delta theorem is all about. So, that was the path on how I got there. When did I start? I started probably 10 years ago, even thinking about this. And quite frankly, when I sat down to write the book, I had things all over the place, probably like a lot of you, where I had a note here and a note there and a shoebox here and that kind of stuff. And I literally had to just organize myself around that so that I could even remember, well, wait, why did I think that was something that I wanted to remember? And so I just, went through that process, and it took a number of years, quite frankly, to just organize into this where I'm at today. By the way, what a great joy it is for me to be in this space. I mean, this is a very joyous day for me. And to be in a positivity vibe is like just a wonderful place for me to be. So I want to thank you for hosting me here this morning. It's really very, very special to me.
Thanks so much. That means the world to us, Bret. Okay, Success Minded, I think you have another question.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much, Bret. We are honored to host you here as well. You bring so much insight into the community. And as Indra mentioned earlier, this is a different direction to what our usual spaces are. And I think this is a good direction that we're taking, where you're bringing in your expertise, your wisdom to this space. And we are dearly happy that you can make it to this space today. I had another question actually, and you mentioned about your story about finding true wealth. What do you think is the biggest challenge that most people face while achieving their purpose? I mean, finding their purpose or achieving their success. What do you think is the biggest challenge in that?
Yeah, one of the things that I found in working both with my clients, which were either when I was, serving them, I'm no longer in that space. I retired a couple of years ago, and I'm now doing the coaching and the speaking and the writing. But one of the things that I found in working with coaching clients and financial clients that I had was when I asked this question, tell me what your purpose is. What I normally got was a look of deer in headlights. And I'd get a response that said something like this: I don't know. I don't know. It's too big of a question for me to be able to answer. And by the way, if I answer it, does that mean that it can never change? Like, I don't have the option for it to be different somewhere out there in the future? And so it's this daunting question for people. And yet, when you talk about a very critical thing for all of us to have, that is a powerful why, a purpose, our reason for being. And so oftentimes what I find is that people, me included, shied away from answering that question. And so I had to work with a different way of helping figure that question out, or the answer to that question out. And here's what I did. It's part of the Delta theorem. Instead of starting with something like purpose, I could say to you, Success Minded, tell me what your priorities are. And you'd say, well, let's see. I'm not sure. And I'd say, well, are you single, married? Do you have a career? What's your stage in life? These are all things that you start to tease out what the things that are most important to you are. And then if I said to you, listen, what do you stand for? What are the things that are non-negotiables in your life? What are those things that are your principles that you operate by? For me, one of my principles, actually, it comes from a Justin Timberlake song of all things. It's a song that says, sometimes the greatest way to say something is to say nothing at all. That's a pretty good principle. Sometimes I talk too much, and I want to have that as a principle for, what I'm doing. And then finally, if I say to you, tell me what your hair is on fire. What is your passion? What do you love to do? You could probably tell me that. I love to host spaces, and I love to encourage people and that kind of stuff. What I found was that if I started with those as the foundation, and then I had them map those three things almost like Olympic rings, where they overlap, and right in the middle where the overlap is where their powerful why starts to come out, where their purpose starts to reveal itself. And by the way, because priorities change over time, because life changes, guess what can change? Your purpose. Because things are fluid. Things happen. They come and go from that standpoint. So, those were the things. The obstacle was purpose, but then overcoming that was, again, what I write about in the Delta theorem of how to tease these things out so that you can discover what your powerful why or your purpose is.
Wow, so much of that, I'm sure, resonated with many of us sitting here in the space and many of the people that are going to be listening to the replay. And at this point, I also want to point out to everybody, check out the post that's up in the nest. If you're having tech issues, linking into that, I've also retweeted it. It's on my page as well as on Bret's page, of course. The main post for his book launching at Amazon today. So make sure you check that out. And yes, it is available up in the space, in the nest. So also, you started to really hone in on some of those areas in your book. I definitely had a moment there where we connected when you mentioned about the LA traffic on the freeway.
Exactly. You've been there.
And yes, so many times. And it is a time to reflect on our why. I agree.
For sure. We got a lot of time to reflect, don't we?
Exactly. It's a time of thinking, of course, and observation and reflection. Well, I want to build onto some of the great things that you've already shared with us. And what are some of the key areas that the book focuses on that many of the people can look forward to who are going to rush out there and grab their copy?
Yeah, well, let me explain actually the title of the book, which is kind of an interesting title, The Delta Theorem. Here's what it is. The Delta Theorem is a math equation. Okay, now nobody leaves at this point in time on here. Let me go through it first. But it's literally a framework that's in the form of a math equation. And it looks like this: alpha over p cubed by EF squared equals delta. That is the equation. Here's what it means. Alpha is the first letter in the Greek alphabet. And so in this framework, it represents your powerful why, your first thing, your one thing, your reason for being, your purpose. It sits on top of a foundation, because it's alpha over p cubed, of your priorities, your principles, and your passion. I just touched on all of those things just a moment ago in the space where, purpose having a foundation inside of priorities, principles, and passion. It's by E, which stands for effort. Then in fact, here's what I find is that I can have all this theoretical knowledge about purpose, or just this head knowledge, and I can figure it all out, and I can write it down, and I can almost put it up on a shelf somewhere, and it looks really good. But if I don't do anything with it, if I don't activate it, it doesn't do anything. And so it's multiplied by E, or effort, so that you're activating what your purpose is. And then F actually stands for failure. And this is the only place where math comes up in this whole equation, because usually I found that in my life, I looked at failure as a negative, and many people do. But interestingly enough, when you square a negative in math, it becomes a positive. And so the concept here is the learning that comes from failure by squaring it up. So you put all that together again, alpha over p cubed by EF squared equals delta. And back to the Greek alphabet, delta is the symbol for change, for making a difference, for having an impact. So the book walks through this whole framework, chapter by chapter, of things like, let's talk about priorities and how are they different than prioritization, or let's talk about your principles, where they come from, and where maybe a dark side is to principles. And let's talk about passion and how you might come about it. One of the things I actually found myself doing is that, I hadn't finished the book yet. And frankly, I started on Twitter in November of last year, thanks to my nephew, who introduced me to a great community that I didn't really even know existed. And one of the people that I found there was Sahil Bloom. Sahil Bloom doesn't know me. He has no idea I exist. And, but what I found was I learned of his story, and he's got an amazing story. He's got a story that is one in which he was, working hard in the private equity world and doing very, very well. And then the pandemic hits. And the pandemic forces him to start to do stuff like get involved with posting things that he had a passion for, writing, encouraging, these kinds of things. And what happened is that he started to cultivate his passion. This is my understanding of his story from what I had heard on podcasts and what have you. He started cultivating his passion. And now, I mean, I love reading his stuff. I'm so encouraged by it. And I think probably many of you are too, if you've seen what he does on Twitter. I actually included him in this book because I had space and I was talking about passion. And I wanted to make the point that it's not just like follow your passion. It's how do you cultivate your passion? And I thought he gave a really good kind of like interesting way for me to see how he cultivated his passion. He turned into something that was really, it's quite fantastic. So, those are the things that are inside the book. And I write about chapter by chapter and walking people through that. And, it's a great book for a coach to have so that they can walk people through this. And it's a great book for a parent to have so that they can walk their kids through, this kind of a framework.
Thanks so much. And what the passion really comes through in your voice and in your whole being, Bret. So it's just amazing to have you here in the space for this interview. Something that really, wow, I just really, my whole mind, my whole being just lit up with the concept that you also share in the book about failure. And it's like this failing forward because so many people are afraid, but the learning opportunity is incredible. So I love that piece. And I just wanted to chime in there and just say to you, wow, that's so encouraging because a lot of people stop when they get that first thing.
Failure it's just a very interesting thing, right? I mean, it's so tied up with risk taking, not imprudent risk taking, but risk taking. Let me give you an example of that just in my own life. Many years ago, my dad, he'd run 60 marathons, and I'd never run one with him. I didn't really have the time to do it. And my older brother, he and my dad did many marathons together, and it's just a great thing, and I always wanted to, but just couldn't do it. Well, my dad called me up and he said, listen, the New York Marathon is going to be my last marathon. And I decided then and there, unbeknownst to him, that I was going to run it in honor of my dad. It was like his omega, his last marathon. It was going to be my alpha and omega, my first and last, basically. So, in secret, I trained, and you got to train. You got to do the work. You got to put in the effort, right? What happened to me is I went up to the mountains this one particular weekend, and I had this training run to do, and the mountains are hard to run in. First of all, they're steep. The air is thin. It's hard. And so I started running. I was just getting gassed. And I remembered that I passed this soccer field. And I thought to myself, why don't I just run around that and, run around it because it's flat. So I did. And what I found was that suddenly I started thinking to myself, this is just like your life. You're just going in circles. And there was this little path, this dirt path off to the side that I passed by. And it was rugged. It was like, a rain kind of ruts. And I thought to myself, I can't twist my ankle, then I won't be able to do this thing. And I just kept getting this pull. Take a risk. So I did. I turned right onto this path this just one particular time. And what happened is it went along this most unbelievable creek you could imagine. And it passed by this meadow that was just fantastic. And trees with birds, and actually ended, on the path was a suspension bridge. that went over the top of this creek. I mean, it was beautiful. And I thought to myself, if I didn't risk, I'd never have seen this. I would have never gotten this, and that's the thing with risk and also failure. Like, that was not a fail for me. And even if I would have twisted my ankle, which would have been thought a fail, I still would have seen it all. And that would have been a good thing. But when I risked, yes, I risked and we all do, we risk the chance of us failing. But if you don't risk, guess what? You automatically fail by definition, because you're just going to sit there with, in your safe space, if you will. So, that's the concept inside of F squared, learning from our failure and taking risk to be able to really come alive and make a difference in this world.
Success Minded, over to you.
Yeah, great insights you've been sharing so far, Bret. And I'm loving this space, honestly. The conversation that we're having and the wisdom you're sharing is totally awesome. I had another question for you, actually. We've been talking about mindset, and you from the start, you've been talking about a concept that everybody defines differently. That is the concept of wealth. How do you define wealth? Just so our audience gets to know what true wealth that you're talking about from the beginning. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, I touched on that earlier in the space, and here's how I see wealth. And this is based on, experience that I had with what people would call wealthy people. Now, oftentimes what we do is we just equate wealth with the financial side of stuff. And listen, the financial side of stuff is definitely a component of wealth. But there's other elements to wealth. There's relational wealth. So when somebody is wondering, what is my work or my money going to do to my kids or my spouse or my relationship with others? That's relational wealth. There's also physical wealth, that we're sound people physically, that we are, surviving from a biological, physical perspective. So that's wealth. There's mental wealth, having peace of mind. There's spiritual wealth, having thoughts of transcendence and legacy even. And then there's the wealth of time, that it's limited. And yet, when you have this understanding and awareness of the present time, that can make you feel wealthy. I call all of that true wealth. There's wealth, and then there's true wealth, and that is that wholehearted nature of the financial, the relational, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, and the temporal or time, which is what I see as being truly wealthy.
Thank you so much. So much is shared there, and it's just a prequel to what you have in the book. Something else to look forward to in your book is where you share insights of turning the negative into positive. This topic is sure to win the hearts of the Positivity Vibe Tribe community here. And in fact, already you've won hearts. One of our long-term members in the space, Julia, has already just purchased your book.
Thank you, Julia. I appreciate that.
Yeah, she just couldn't stand it, had to rush out and get a hold of this wonderful book. So thank you for your support, Julia. And I'll throw it back to you for the questions. So what can the readers look forward to in this chapter about the negative into the positive?
Yeah, we touched on that briefly, or maybe not so briefly, just a minute ago on, failure and squaring up failure. What they'll find is inside that chapter is authenticity, frankly. I mean, I share some personal failures that I experienced, myself, and what I was able to learn from those particular things. I had a situation, in my personal life that involved, me not making it home one weekend for a flight down from San Francisco where I was working, and my wife and daughter, didn't know where I was, and they were, scared and what have you. And it was an epic failure on my behalf. You'll read about that in the book. It's worth reading. But it was an epic failure on my behalf, to put them through that particular ordeal. We all survived, but more than just survived, it was a learning that came from that, that I wouldn't put my wife or my daughter through that. Reasons that it happened, in my mind could be justified. No, they're not. No, sometimes, these epic failures are things that they can be avoided. And so, I talk about not just the authenticity around particular failures for me, and there's others that I note, but there's the learning that came to me as a result of that helped me, to mend relationship and to go from there. So yeah, it's a very, very important, chapter. And it's, what I love about it and why it just ties in so great with this tribe is, it's a negative into a positive, because it can be a positive. These failures can be positives if we're able to, look at them and learn from them, and then, either don't do that ourselves or maybe help somebody else not to do it. I have a 25-year-old daughter. I'd love to think that she's listening to everything that I have to say. She's not. But I'd love for her to learn from my mistakes, and yet she's going to make her own mistakes. And that's okay too, as long as she learns the main concept, which is learn from your mistakes, square them up, don't shirk back from them, look and see how they contribute to, you being a better individual on a go-forward basis.
Very inspiring indeed. Success Minded, over to you.
Yeah, great summary of the chapter. And if somebody's here listening to the space and wondering what we're talking about, today is the launch of our guest Bret Magpiong's book, The Delta Theorem. It's on Amazon right now. It's available for everyone to buy, and we're hosting this interview to enlighten you what's in this book and what you can expect if you decide to buy the book. So this is in light of the book in whole. How would you sum up the Delta Theorem? How would you describe its main focus is, and what is the main objective of the book, according to you?
Yeah, it's really right in the subtitle. It's an innovative framework for coming fully alive and truly wealthy. And it's important that it's said that it's a framework. As I said earlier on the call, the Delta Theorem itself takes the form of a math equation. And so it may be thought of as a formula for life. But listen, we all know this. There is no formula for life. There's no formula for life. Life has to be lived. I mean, formulas are black and white kind of like things, and life is lived in color. That's what it's all about. And that's maybe sounds cliche-ish, but it's true that we have to live our life in color. And so I use the word framework for a very particular reason, and that is it lays out a process that somebody can go through to kind of answer a question, which is, I want to make a difference. I want to have an impact. I want to change some way, shape, or form, but I don't necessarily know how to do it. And so the book is a framework to walk people through how to go about putting themselves in the best position to make a difference, to create change. Listen, there's also the fact that there's no guarantees. I don't guarantee in this book that you will make a difference. What I will say is that if you go through this, you'll put yourself in a really great position to make a difference. And that's, I think, what the intention around this book is. It's also, if there are coaches out there that are listening in and they're thinking to themselves, I'm a coach. Hey, I'd like to have something that I could walk somebody through. This is a framework that you could literally walk people through how to, create this impact or put yourself in a position or those clients in a position to make a difference.
That's an incredible share. Thank you so much, Bret. And a lot of people are probably just dying to click the Amazon button. And guys, if you want an easy way to find it, up in the nest, we have posted the link to Amazon for Bret's book. So that's an easy way to grab your copy of the Delta Theorem, is to head up to the nest or to head over to, Bret has it on his pinned tweet. I have it at the top of my page, and Success Minded also has it on his page. So do get a copy. And thank you so much, everyone who are heading out there to buy it now. We've had so many guests talk about purpose in the tribe before, but not in terms of how you describe improving performance and change. Can you share a glimpse from your newly released book about purpose, performance, and change, Bret?
Yeah. So, I touched a lot already on the purpose side of stuff. Let's talk about effort and performance. Inside the book, I have this another concept. Again, it's an analogy to try to help people kind of remember some things. And that is the analogy of a Rubik's Cube. Okay. So just think about a Rubik's Cube. It's got 6 sides or 6 facets to it. It's got 6 different colors. Each one of those facets has 9 tiles, at least in, your standard Rubik's Cube. And listen, I've never been able to solve a Rubik's Cube. I can break it apart and try to piece it back together. But I haven't been able to solve it. In Rubik's Cube, what we normally do is we try to solve for all those sides, right? Well, in the Delta Theorem, what I talk about is the 6 facets when it comes to effort, and especially training up effort. And what the 6 facets represent are 6 core competencies that we as human beings have. One is physical. Another one is mental. Another one is emotional. Another one is instinctual. Another one is the natural. And another one is spiritual. And so if you look at a Rubik's Cube and you said, okay, listen, I am going to take each one of those competencies and I'm going to have each one of the sides represent those 6 core competencies. What I found in my own life and with people that I work with is that we don't solve for one side alone. In fact, a Rubik's Cube and the way that it spins is more like the way that these competencies work with each other. It's like they're all kind of mixed together so that if I'm doing something and I'm training myself physically, let's say, and I'm training for that marathon that I was doing with my dad, what I found was that inside of that training, a few things popped up. Mentally, I could either quit or I could stick with it. That's a mental training. Emotionally, I'd be mad or angry because I'm not doing something. That was emotional training. Intuitional was my sense. Take that path that I talked about. That was a gut instinct. Go this route. The natural is things like, being out in nature and having that be a part of it. And spiritual is this notion of transcendence and, something greater than ourselves. That in fact, what happens here is that we talk about being half-hearted people or wholehearted people. Well, what I talk about in the book in terms of performance and activating your purpose is to be a wholehearted person. And the way that you're a wholehearted person is that you are recognizing and aware that each one of those facets, those 6 competencies, are inner working with each other all the time. And that these facets can have, let's say, the tiles associated with them on the physical side is not just strength training or stamina. It's things like fueling, what you put into your body, or hydration, with water, or sleep, rest, what we do inside there. So this notion of the effort that it requires to activate our purpose is, a full understanding of that these 6 competencies, just like a Rubik's Cube, are interacting with each other. And then what we also need to do is remember, don't start running right from the start. You'll likely quit. Instead, crawl, walk, run. Start off by crawling. If you have this purpose, that you have this big purpose, my purpose is to inspire aliveness. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, do a TED Talk. No. How about if I get engaged on Twitter with a wonderful community of people and figure out how to, engage with them just through tweets? That's crawling. And then eventually maybe I'll walk, and then I get to run like I get to today on Spaces and do something like this, because it feels like a really great running event for me. So, those are the kind of things that I talk about inside the book.
Wow, there were so many great examples. Thank you so much for sharing that. Over to you, Success Minded.
Yeah, I have a personal question now, actually. And we've been talking about your book all this time. And, anybody who's tried to write a book knows that it takes a special kind of person to write a book. And the special kind of person, what makes the person special is that he reads a lot of books. He reads a lot of content from other authors. Mm-hmm. So I would just like to ask you, what have been some of your favorite books in your whole career of reading books, and what would you say are some inspirations, some authors that have inspired you to maybe write this book?
Yeah. Wow, that is a big question. It's almost like the purpose question that I talked about previously, because there are so many great books that are out there. I feel like that comment of standing on the shoulders of giants is really how I feel today. Is that much of the book is that I wrote is from having learned from others. So, listen, here's some of the things that have stuck out with me. Early on, I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It is just unbelievable. And of course, when I talk about making a difference and having an impact, Viktor Frankl talks specifically on that inside that book about man's search for meaning and having meaning be such an important part of things. I've also been greatly influenced by an author by the name of John Eldredge. He's written many books, one of which is called The Journey of Desire. And I just love it because it opens up this understanding that desire sometimes has a name associated with it that can be bad, that, like don't follow that because it's going to lead you down the wrong path. And yet we are made from desire. Like, we desire to have hope, and we have desire to be positive. And so this Journey of Desire is just a wonderful book, that I read and love so much. I read a book called The Psychology of Stupidity, which is, a very funny book, but it led to, the beginning of chapter 1, if I could share that in my book, because what happened to me in chapter 1 is that I talk about how I came across a bumper sticker while I was exercising with my dog, and the bumper sticker read this: "Life is tough. It's even tougher if you're stupid." And it stopped me in my tracks, not because of the crass nature of it. It is crass. It just sounds like, oh, really? Not sure that's a great, but it's actually quite hopeful. I've run across other bumper stickers that says life is tough and then you die. That is not hopeful. life is tough. It's even tougher if you're stupid, said something to me like, wow, I need to be wise. I need to be smart because life is tough already. And if you do stupid stuff inside of it, it's going to be even tougher. So, this book, Psychology of Stupidity, was one in which, I read about, various people talking about that aspect of success. So yes, there's just tons of books. By the way, it's free mentorship. I hope that everyone understands that. We're always talking about getting a mentor. Like, you could have a mentor by the name of John Eldridge. You can have a mentor by the name of Viktor Frankl. You can have a mentor by the name of Angela Duckworth. I mean, this is free mentoring. That's why I love to read so much. I hope that somebody might say, wow, Bret Magpiong could be a mentor to me inside of the Delta Theorem. That would be a wonderful, great feeling for me to know.
That's so awesome. I think we all had a giggle, but at the same time, it was very deep what you shared. So often, as you know, comedy is a way of getting through to many of us, through reading, through sharing ideas, and we all had a laugh and we all sort of open up sometimes. So when we giggle about things, so that was delightful. Thank you. So Bret, I think it's time that we can invite speakers up. If anybody has questions, feel free to request the mic, which is everybody in the tribe, you know where it is, at the bottom left-hand side of your phone, down the bottom. Feel free to request if you have any questions about the book, about anything that Bret has shared in the space. Now would be a great time. I know we had a lot of requests earlier, and hopefully you guys are going to come back. There's a lot of comments in the space. Thank you so much for jumping into the chat, everybody, and enjoying this interview. I have a comment here from Hila Wisdom. The formula is absolutely captivating. We have a question here also from the chat, Bret, from Kafia Deepak asked, how can I refresh my mind when I'm in doubt?
How can you refresh your mind when you're in doubt? That's a really, first of all, it's a very deep question, for sure. So, look, I think that it's important to recognize that when I talked about the wholehearted nature of the area around performance and looking at how the interaction of things like the physical and the mental and the emotional and the natural all come into play, what I'd say is that a place to start, to crawl, is to put yourself in a position to where maybe you do something that challenges yourself, even physically. And it can be something relatively small, because what can happen then is that these other areas get activated for us. Things like breathing or mental toughness or mental acuity, things like that can help when, you're feeling in this particular place. You don't start running. Don't start off with like the grand, thing that needs to happen. Just start small and go from there. The other thing that's important is that oftentimes we can get stuck inside of our small story. It feels big, but it's kind of small. And when we contribute to somebody else, when we get out of our own zone, and I'm not even talking about our own comfort zone, because that question sounds uncomfortable. But when we can be in service to others, suddenly our mindset changes, and it can have an impact from that perspective. So, that's what I would say, are areas to explore to work through questions like that.
Thanks so much. There is a follow-up question I see. Let me just grab that for you. Okay, so from Hello Wisdom, how does the Delta Theorem book differentiate itself from others on the similar topic?
What I found was that the reason I put this into this type of a framework that looks like this equation is that I often found a lot of these concepts were being addressed in isolation. So I could read a book on failure and the learning that comes from failure, but it wasn't necessarily tied in with this whole framework or process. Or there's tons of books on, effort and performance and those kinds of things, but it didn't really tie in with all of those things. Or, the purpose side of stuff didn't necessarily deal with failure and what have you. Certainly there are components inside these books that do touch on these, but I didn't find anything that had this cohesive kind of almost linear framework to take all of these concepts into something that, I like to think, makes sense. And it's not logical sense. It makes sense. Look, it's an equation, but the reality is that I put it that way so that we could all remember the key elements. Because if I say something like alpha over p cubed by EF squared, I can say that like I just did in 4 seconds. Now, it's going to make your eyes roll up inside your head. But if you started to think about what is alpha, what is p cubed, what is E, what is effort, what is failure, what are these various things? I didn't find that there was a comprehensive book that basically interwove those. Now, they could be out there. There's a lot of great material that's out there. I didn't find it for myself. And so, that's why I put this together in this format.
Thanks so much for explaining that. Okay. We seem to have a lot of questions in the chat, Bret.
Okay.
Okay. Also, there's another question here. They would love to hear, what kind of impact do you hope your book will have on the reader?
Again, I go back to the subtitle. I want the reader to come alive. I want all of us to come alive. I heard a quote from academic. His last name is Thurman. His first name is I'm blanking on it right now, but he said this: don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and do that. Because what the world needs is you fully alive. I think that's absolutely true. Because when I have found that not just me being alive, but when I see others alive, like really alive, and you just know it, look out. I mean, really look out, because they are just change makers. The other thing is that there's this concept I talk about in the book. It's called the butterfly effect. Oftentimes we can think, oh, well, I'm going to make a big difference in that kind of stuff. Wait a minute. Small differences matter. When I go out with my dog in the morning, sometimes I come across a nail on the side of the road. And I think to myself, I could either step over the top of it or I can pick it up. And when I pick it up, I usually think something like this. This nail could puncture somebody's tire, and that person could be on their way to the hospital, and that could be devastating impact. The butterfly effect is this concept where a butterfly flaps its wings in South Africa, which the ripple effect of that small little action can potentially change the course of a hurricane all the way over in the Caribbean because of the picking up of steam and that kind of stuff. I'd love to see people come fully alive in small ways or big ways so that we can have tremendous impact in our communities, in our families, in our workplaces, in our own lives. That's what I'm hoping that this can create inside of this book.
Wow, that's a inspiring explanation. And I just loved what you shared, and I'm sure everybody else, I'm speaking for the entire tribe here, Bret, but everybody loved that these small little things that we can do are greatly underestimated. They're just greatly underestimated. The small things, and especially that being thoughtful, seeing that example that you just shared was being thoughtful for others. This is a small thing, and we can extend ourselves every single day with these little things that really do make a big difference. So that was really just a wonderful, powerful share. And the other thing which was really resonating was how we often can overlook just, as I call it, being little robots each day. Okay. We get into this sort of mode of I'm going to be a robot, and it's almost like we're not alive, so something has to happen, something has to go wrong in order for us to snap out of it sometimes. It's almost like we are just on this road walking ahead, and we're just doing what we do, and basically a lot of it is being tuned to whatever work we do, our schedules, and almost not taking a deep breath and realizing that we're alive. So it really captured a lot for me when you expanded on that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you. Listen, I think you are exactly tapping into what I'm talking, about here is that, I think it was Emerson that says something like, most people live lives of quiet desperation, and that is just such it's really a sad thing, but it's oftentimes it's true. Now there's reasons for that. We talked about a book, who authors and that kind of stuff. John Eldredge has this concept called the message of the arrows. The message of the arrows. And this is what the message of the arrows is. Something that we do gets whacked. We put ourselves out there and it gets whacked. Maybe we go out on a date and it doesn't work out, right? And so the message, an arrow basically gets shot at us in a sense. It's usually shot into our heart, right? It's like, and the message can be something like this: I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again because it hurts too much. Or I'll never put myself out there to try to do something, because it didn't pay off and that kind of stuff. So this concept of the message of the arrows, like what message are we taking? And if we take this message that's like, we make an agreement that I will never do that again, then we will live lives of quiet desperation. I experienced that. We all experience that. So the question is like, what do we do with that? Now, listen, I'm not a psychologist or anything. There's a lot of work to be done inside of that, but it's just this concept of like, wow, what did I take from that? And what agreement did I make inside of that risk that I took? And how is that holding me back from being fully alive? Here's the other thing that I believe is so true. Usually the arrows are shot into our strength, meaning that somebody who feels like I'll never do that again in terms of a date, they probably have the hugest heart and are a great love for somebody, but they think to themselves, this is a weakness area. When this arrow is taking them out of their strength, or in the workplace, or being a leader, or whatever the case is. So, I encourage us all, don't listen to the message of the arrow that is the negative side of stuff. Sometimes that arrow is shot right into your strength. And so live from your strength. It's hard, but live from your strength.
Wow, that was very inspiring to us all. I think it's underestimated, and thank you so much for those great examples that many of us can draw on later. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to listen to the replay, especially from the Positivity Vibe Tribe community, from Success Minded's community, from everywhere out in the Twitterverse. Plus, it's always going to have a home, this wonderful interview on the YouTube channel. So for many times more, we're going to use this link and share it out so many other people can enjoy this conversation. So I'm just going to go through the chat one more time and see if there's any other questions that we have in addition. Everybody, you are welcome to come on up and ask a question to Bret about the book, about any of the topics that he's discussed today. Sometimes we don't get a lot of speakers, and sometimes we do. But you've been covering off all of our questions so well. Thank you so much, Bret.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Where's the best place for everybody to contact you if they're looking to get a hold of you, Bret?
I made it very easy, and that is I have a website called connectwithbret.com. Just connect with Bret, and that's Bret with one T. And there you'll find, links to other websites, the links to the Delta Theorem landing page, Twitter, LinkedIn links, and that kind of stuff. So it just makes it very easy. It's just there, connectwithbret.com.
Perfect. And if in doubt, they can reach out to you here on Twitter and send you a DM and head over to your profile page.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And by the way, everyone, if you're not already following Bret, make sure you are. Just head over to the bubble over here and follow him. He has great information and content on his page, many of which might be a little reminder for you who have read the book or start to read the book. He has incredible content, and do follow him and connect with him. And also make sure that you are also keeping up to date with anything new that Bret has by being connected to him. We have been having an incredible chat today. Thank you so much for your time, Bret. I have one last question. What message would you like to leave with everybody today in general that might sum up your message from the book and from you as a author?
Yeah, thanks. I believe that repetition, my daughter tells me I say the same things over and over again, but repetition matters. It matters a lot. My encouragement to everyone is to come alive. Really, come alive. Figure out what that is for you. The framework that I laid out there is extraordinarily helpful. But you got to live your life in color, as I described previously. So, I hope that you all will come fully alive. I also encourage exactly what's happening inside of this space, and that is community, that connection with each other inside of a tribe like this, or one-on-one with people. There's folks that are on this space. Roseanne is an amazing individual. She is one of the kindest people, and connection with her is just a fantastic thing. I didn't have that before getting involved with Twitter. So I encourage that to build community and come fully alive.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very heartfelt message to the tribe, and we send you back lots of heartfelt wishes, Bret. Success Minded, love to hear your thoughts on this incredible interview that we've been on.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Bret, for taking the time to come to our spaces and honor us with your presence, just being here. And secondly, thank you for sharing the immense amount of knowledge that you've been sharing throughout this space. I've been loving what you've been sharing, and I myself have been learning so much, and I might even pick up the book myself, just to see what the book is even about, right? Although I checked on Amazon, it isn't showing up on Amazon India. Is it just in the US currently?
I better have my publisher look into that, because I definitely I want you to get a copy of this book. So.
Yes, I would definitely will. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for coming here. It's been great to have you here, and it's a great interview that we had. Thank you so much, everyone who have been asking questions in the chat. If you have any other questions, this is the time. We're ending, and we might not have Bret on stage after this, to even ask the question. Of course, you can then reach out to Bret in his DMs, but this is the public platform. If you ask 10 more people might learn from your question. So this is the last time. If you have a question, put it in the chat, or if you want to come up to ask Bret directly, then feel free to do so. The stage is always open. But if nobody's coming up, then it's time to close. And I thank Bret. I thank everybody who came to the space to listen. If you join in late, you can always listen to the replay. As soon as the space ends, if you stay till the end, you will receive the replay link. That is the technology behind spaces, right? That's the magic behind spaces. As soon as the space ends, you'll be greeted with the replay of the space, and you then can listen to all the wonderful insights Bret has been sharing so far. It's been over an hour of wonderful insights from Bret. So I highly, highly recommend, if you've joined in late, I recommend you go back and listen to the replay. Not only does it help us, it also helps you, I think, learn about this wonderful information that he's been sharing. With that said, I see one of our friends up here, Jeff Funk. Do you have a question for Bret?
I do. First things first, I certainly have done the 405 many times over. And it's certainly, as having a sister that lives in Long Beach and lived in Malibu and all that stuff, I totally, absolutely get how it makes you just about think about everything in life. So my quick question to you is, you had mentioned, aside from the 405, is there any other monumental times in your life that you're able to share, whether it's scary or prosperous, that's really led you to this kind of work and gospel?
Oh, wow. Interestingly enough, part of the hardest part of the writing process, Jeff, was that, there were things that I wanted to put in the book that had to be cut out because it just would get to be, too much. There's a number of things that, contributed to just this thought process and what have you. Career-wise, for instance, there was a time when for instance, I was part of a very well-to-do, somewhat startup, but a very large VC-sponsored firm, and I found myself in a situation where I was leading a group of people, and I had been charged with hiring up this entire team, and I did, and I was hiring some folks that away from other places that they really needed the job. We all need our job. They really needed the jobs. And then through circumstances that just financially happened to the firm, the firm had to make some cuts. And, they came to me and said, you need to find some dollars for us. And it was extraordinarily difficult, because as I said, there were some folks that, not long before I had persuaded them to come on board, and unbeknownst to me that this was, happening and stuff. And so I did and made it work, frankly, and with limited damage that I felt like to folks. And I said to my team at the time, listen, if I'm being asked again, I'll be the first one to go. And it was an important thing for me to share with this team of people, because I was their leader, and they knew that it was tenuous, and I meant it. I really meant it, because I negotiated hard on their behalf. Lo and behold, not that long after, I was asked to make more cuts. And I talked about principles and having principles. And one of mine is, let my yes be yes and my no be no. And the essence of that is, if I give my word, I'm going to follow through. And then I had to look in the mirror and say, did I really mean that to that group of people, not long before? Because I was being told, listen, we want to promote you, but we need you to help us like points of cuts. And I had to decide, is this really a principle of mine? Is my yes, yes, and my no, no? And that's where rubber hits the road. And I chose to stand on my yes is yes and my no is no. And I say this humbly. I'm not looking to draw attention to me. I stepped away from the firm. And it was hard. And it took a toll. But that's the depth of principles. That was something that we can talk about this stuff, or we can have them to guide the decisions that we make. I didn't write about that in the book. Thank you for asking me. I appreciate that. But that's an example of something that, happened. And that I can say that when I wrote the chapter on principles, while I'm not perfect, I'm a man that does believe that principles matter, and they matter a lot. So that's an example, Jeff.
That's very much analogous to the gladiator scene that you created earlier on in this conversation. So I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And if I see you on the 405, just wait. We'll be stuck side by side.
Yeah, exactly. You probably have been somebody that I've honked at once or twice. So I apologize. I apologize for that.
Thank you so much, Bret. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful question, Jeff. We're going to go to Stephen next as the next speaker. If you have a question. Stephen, are you able to speak? Oh, okay. He's having some sort of technical issues again. Okay, let's head over to Glenn Magpiong. Warm welcome, Glenn, to the tribe.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. Congratulations, Bret. I have a quick question. The cover of the book appears to be of David. What is the significance of that?
Well, first of all, Glenn is my brother, and a very good man. So, and this was not teed up his way, by the way, as such. Yeah, thanks for this question. So, when I graduated college, which was many years ago, I had my job lined up to start in the fall, and I had time in the summer. And I decided at the time to backpack through Europe. And so this was a time when, having a backpack, a sleeping bag, a Eurail pass, and a hitchhiker's thumb was something that I could do. I literally, when I started my first job, I had one suit at a very professional firm, and I had 4 shirts and 3 ties. And I just changed them because I did not have, money at the time. But I went to Europe and, was sleeping in train stations and so on and so forth. I just so happened that I was in Florence, Italy, and I went into a museum in Florence, Italy. And some of you maybe have been there. I don't know. I was very fortunate to be able to go. And inside this museum were works of the Renaissance artist Michelangelo. I didn't know it. I was not a big art person, but I knew that something I probably wanted to do. So as I went inside, what I found was that there was a hallway that was lined with 4 blocks of marble that are called the unfinished works of Michelangelo. They are literally blocks of marble with an arm coming out of it. I mean, a perfectly shaped arm, but just an arm. Or another one is like half a torso. And they are unfinished works of Michelangelo. And they're actually called the prisoners, is what I learned. And it's the perfect example. It's such a great description because they are prisoners looking to be let loose, but they're stuck inside of this block of marble. And then the way the curator set up this museum is that as you turn this corner, at the end of this hallway is the statue of the David. And the David is the most magnificent thing you probably will ever be near. It's 14 feet tall. It is absolutely perfect. It's breathtaking. And years later, I thought about that layout and why it was so impactful. And what I realized was this: that's our life. That's kind of our life. We start out as these blocks of unfinished material. And then what comes along are people like coaches or space, people that run spaces, or podcasters, or teachers, coaches, parents, and things start to get chipped away and we start to come out. And yet we're stuck. We're stuck oftentimes. But then when we fully come out, what happens is that our glory, our splendor is revealed. That's what that layout was about. And I put the David on the cover of the book because it's representative of us coming fully alive in our splendor, in that glory. That's why it's on there. Now, unfortunately, we feel like our blocks of a material are flawed, or the chips aren't quite right, or things happen and that kind of stuff, or we're stuck. But a book like the Delta Theorem is intended to be a chisel to help release you, to help people come fully alive, because when they're fully alive, then true wealth really starts to happen. So that's why the David is on the cover of the book, and that's what that is representative of.
And I think that was the perfect way to end this incredible interview and the journey. Wow, that was a fantastic question. Amazing. So thank you so much, Bret, for being our special guest today. And thank you for all the wonderful answers that you had to the questions. It's truly been a pleasure having you here in the Positivity Vibe Tribe. Success Minded and myself have really enjoyed this interview, and everybody, make sure that you check out Bret's book, The Delta Theorem, launched today in the Positivity Vibe Tribe and available on Amazon. The link is up in the nest. It's also on Bret's profile. It's on Success Minded, and I also have it at the top of my post at the moment. So you can check that out, get a copy today of the Delta Theorem, and go into more depth on all the conversations that have been had in this space. And it truly has been a wonderful space. So thank you so much, Bret.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a joy. And as I said, this is a launch party for me. So thank you for hosting my launch party. I really appreciate it.
It's truly been our pleasure. The pleasure has been all of ours in the Positivity Vibe Tribe community. Hey, I wanted to reach out and say a special thank you to the speakers that have come up today. Wow, we've had a lot of activity in the chat today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the chat. And also, ahead of time, thank you to everybody who's going to be listening to the replay. And we look forward to comments. You can still reach out to Bret through Twitter, through the DMs at a later date if there's anything that has been unanswered. And also, we'll go back through and make sure sometimes the chat, we don't get to see everything. So we will go back, Success Minded myself, and check through that. I just have a little bit of feedback from one of our regulars. Julia, thank you so much. She just mentioned it was a dynamite space. Thank you so much, Bret, for making it such a dynamite space. And
great.
And also this celebration of today, this launch party, it has been incredible. And we really appreciate you choosing the Positivity Vibe Tribe today as a place to launch your book. Now available.
Thank you so much.
Amazon. Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Special thank you to all the listeners out here. Shout out to, hey, Roseanne is in the house. Hey, Glenn, Jeff, Debbie. Thank you, Stephen, for staying the duration. Thank you, Chris, Diane, Julia. Hey, Self-Care Canvas. There are so many people here. I can't even get to all of the names, but we appreciate you. We are so excited that you joined us for this incredible space. We will be back tomorrow, of course, on a regular Wednesday and Thursday. This week is honoring World Meditation Week, so join us tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody. Without you, we do not have a space. And we'll be back very soon tomorrow with another space. In the meantime, we are sending you love, light, and blessings.